It's September 13th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Gami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with North Korea's first ever disclosure of a uranium enrichment facility. The regime made public its uranium enrichment facility for the very first time on Friday, where the leader Kim Jong-un expressed pride and called for more nuclear weapons making. SpaceX managed to perform a historic first private spacewalk on Thursday morning, with a crew made up entirely of non-government astronauts. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has further widened her lead over former President Donald Trump in a recent survey conducted after their debate on Tuesday. Trump rejected a second one with Harris, despite calls from Harris for another. North Korea has, for the first time, publicly revealed a uranium enrichment facility, a key component of its nuclear weapons program. This display of its nuclear arsenal development is being seen as an attempt to put pressure on the U.S. ahead of the presidential elections. Our Moon Hae-ryun starts off.
North Korea showed its uranium enrichment facility for the first time, as leader Kim Jong-un took a tour of the site and urged further nuclear weapon development. Photos released by the state-run Korean Central News Agency on Friday showed Kim walking past rows of centrifuges, learning about the operation of its production lines. Uranium needs to go through a process called enrichment to be developed into an effective nuclear fuel, spun in a centrifuge to separate its isotopes and concentrate the one that is needed. The KCNA did not reveal when the visit occurred or the location of the facility. Kim reportedly expressed great satisfaction during his visit, saying he felt strong just looking at the technology on display, and praised the achievements of scientists, engineers, and the military in the nuclear weapons production sector. Calling for an increase in the number of centrifuges, he pressed the need to strengthen Pyongyang's nuclear capabilities and outlined a long-term plan to do so. South Korea and U.S. intelligence authorities believe that North Korea has uranium enrichment facilities in Yongbyon, North Pyongan province, and in the Kangsan complex near Pyongyang. In 2010, North Korea invited U.S. nuclear physicist Siegfried Hecker to a uranium enrichment facility at the Yongbyon nuclear facility. In an interview last year, Hecker estimated that their total uranium production capacity is about 150 kilograms, roughly 6 bombs worth per year. North Korea's surprise disclosure of the uranium enrichment facility is interpreted as an attempt to put pressure on future negotiations with the U.S. by showing off its nuclear armament ahead of the U.S. presidential election, which is about 50 days away. Stepping up to put the spotlight on the regime's fighting capabilities, Kim was reported to have visited the training facility of North Korea's Special Operations Forces to oversee a combat drill on Wednesday, according to a separate KCNA report. He was said to have emphasized the importance of enhancing training content and methods, and the role of the Special Operations Forces on the battlefield. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned the West against lifting restrictions on the use of long-range missiles by Ukraine. Speaking to a state-owned TASS news agency on Thursday, Putin said allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to attack Russia would be met with an appropriate response, adding it would mean NATO is at war with Russia. According to Putin, NATO countries are not discussing the possibility of Ukraine attacking Russia with long-range weapons provided by the West, but rather on how to directly participate in the conflict alongside Ukraine. The Russian leader also pointed out that the Ukrainian military doesn't have the satellites needed to use long-range weapons to attack Russia, and could only do so without information from NATO member countries, the EU, and the U.S. U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris continues to widen her lead over former President Donald Trump in the latest poll. Despite Trump claiming he won the debate, he's still refusing a second one before the November election. Lee Seung-jae reports.
According to a CNN flash poll that followed Tuesday's televised debate in Philadelphia, 63% of registered voters felt Vice President Kamala Harris performed better than former President Donald Trump. And the Democratic presidential candidate's performance helped boost her support, as another poll showed that she had widened her lead over Trump. In a new Reuters Ipsos survey conducted between Tuesday and Thursday, Harris garnered 47% support compared to Trump's 42%, giving her a 5 percentage point lead over the former president. The latest poll asked 3,095 people, with 1,405 of them registered voters. In a similar survey last month, 45% of people surveyed preferred Harris compared to 41% of the respondents who picked Trump. While the majority in the CNN flash poll showed that Harris performed better than Trump during Tuesday's debate, the former president disagreed and claimed that he won the debate. Trump also said he won't debate Harris again. Taking to his social media platform Truth Social on Thursday, Trump said the first words out of a prizefighter who loses a fight is "I want a rematch." The Harris camp had called for a second debate, as President Joe Biden and Trump had agreed to 2 debates for the elections. Meanwhile, Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance's false claims of Haitian immigrants taking people's pets and eating them have led to increasing fear among the immigrants of being targeted. The City Hall in Springfield, Ohio, the city that was put in the spotlight due to those claims, temporarily closed on Thursday amid bomb threats. The threats also come as an online Haitian media outlet out of Springfield warned its residents of threats being issued at several schools with Haitian children. The city has seen a large inflow of Haitian immigrants in recent years due to its low cost of living and job opportunities. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The 79th UN General Assembly opened on Tuesday. World leaders, policymakers, and international stakeholders are once again gathering in New York to address the world's most urgent challenges and issues related to peace and security. For more, we turn to Professor Han Shuttle this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Dami.
So this year's theme for the General Assembly is leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. What does that say about this year's edition?
Well, I think for one, the UN is trying to take the long view and look at the big picture globally again in the aftermath, or near aftermath anyway, of the COVID-19 pandemic, the worst of it. I think public health took center stage for a few years at the UN, and now I think they're trying to broaden out. Quite literally, the Palestinians will not be left behind this year. They're now going to have a seat at last at the UN General Assembly, though they're not yet a full member. There was a resolution earlier this year to give Palestine some additional rights while keeping Palestine an observer rather than a full member of the UN. And I think the war in Gaza, the conflict between Israel and Hamas in particular, will be a front burner issue as well, because there's, of course, very high pressure at this point for the two sides, for Israel and the Palestinians, to reach a ceasefire in that conflict. That conflict was not going on the last time the UN General Assembly met. It began, of course, in October of last year when Hamas attacked Israeli civilians. So this is the first big meeting where they'll be trying to address this. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be speaking at the General Assembly. And he's, of course, long accused the UN of being anti-Israel. So that should be a very interesting speech. And Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will also be speaking, both of them on the same day. So that will, I think, be a major issue as the summit goes forward.
Definitely, geopolitical tensions, especially the Gaza conflict, will no doubt top the agenda. On top of that, Iran is also attending, reportedly looking to, rekindle talks about the broken nuclear deal with the West at the General Assembly. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it is unlikely that Iran is going to get what it's looking for here, but its president and its foreign minister are making a case to try to restart movement towards some sort of a nuclear deal. Again, this was agreed to during the Barack Obama presidency, and then Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the agreement, which weakened the agreement. There were several European countries involved as well, so I think the EU member states are also on the receiving end of lobbying for Iran right now. But there are a couple of factors here. One, Iran has been clashing at times and even attacking Israel during this war involving Israel and Gaza over the past year. And that will not exactly bring about an appetite for negotiations on nuclear weapons there right now. Even the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, has been criticizing Iran over that. And the other factor is with the US presidential election, I think the last thing that the Kamala Harris campaign would want to do at this point would be to try to extend something and approaching an olive branch toward Israel at this juncture, toward Iran at this juncture, because I don't think there's popular support in the U.S. for another nuclear deal with Iran. When Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out, he did not suffer any kind of backlash in public opinion. But I think if there were movement toward reestablishing that deal, it would come back to haunt the Democrats. So for that reason, I don't think the Biden administration will be on board for it either.
So you're saying the EU and the U.S. will probably turn down the proposal from Iran. But I would like to ask you, why is Iran bringing this deal again at this year's edition?
Well, I think they're looking for investment, and they're looking to be seen as less of a rogue nation globally, and they're looking for anything they can do to further advance their economy. And certainly the previous agreement was one way to do that. So money is often one factor.
Well, on top of that, on top of Gaza conflict, we also have to talk about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be there again to, beg for stronger support from the West. Do you think that will be realized?
That's interesting. And we just saw, of course, the news coverage earlier in your report, Dami, about the statements from Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader, basically threatening the West not to loosen the restrictions on long-range missiles potentially being used from Ukraine toward Russia. Putin claiming that would put NATO at war with Russia, which is going to sound quite threatening to leaders in the West. But Volodymyr Zelensky will be at the General Assembly speaking later this month, and he's looking for further reinforcements from the West. I think we'll certainly see another resolution from the UN. We've seen previous resolutions from the UN criticizing Russia, and this leads to an interesting issue because another topic on the agenda this year at the General Assembly is going to be potential reform of the Security Council. Russia, the belligerent, the invader here of Ukraine, it is one of the 5 permanent members on the UN Security Council, and especially since its attack on Ukraine, there's been some renewed pressure to try to think about how to rejig the composition of the Security Council. So the 5 countries that were basically at the helm of world power after World War II in 1945 when the UN was founded, so they would no longer have disproportionate voice on the Security Council. This would be Russia, China, France, Britain, and the US. So I don't think those 5 countries are necessarily going to agree to UN Security Council reform this year, but the fact that people are talking about it shows some dissatisfaction growing, I think, with Russia's position at the UN Security Council. And I think there will be some sort of symbolic reinforcement for Zelensky, even if it doesn't necessarily help him kick the Russians out of eastern Ukraine any quicker.
Professor Shadow, before I let you go briefly, another notable figure at this year's assembly is North Korean Foreign Minister Chuseok making presence for the first time as a foreign minister since 2018. Why the presence now?
I think this is very interesting, Dami. And of course, we can juxtapose this with the report that you just aired a few minutes ago about Kim Jong-un and basically flaunting the uranium enrichment facilities in North Korea. To me, this suggests that Che might try to make some sort of statement at the UN saying that North Korea wants to be seen as a member of the nuclear club, more legitimated nuclear power. I mean, who knows what she'll say? I don't think anybody really has an idea, and I haven't seen much speculation in the news coverage as to what she would say. So I'm putting myself on a limb by saying that. But it seems between Kim's statement, which, as your reporter said, may be timed in advance of the U.S. presidential elections, but it's also coming right at the start of the UN General Assembly with his foreign minister in New York. So they may be trying to make some statements for greater legitimacy. And one other thing, she's reported anyway by Japanese media to be likely having talks at this with Russian and Chinese delegates as well. So that may be the other, may not so much be her speech, but also what she does behind the scenes in New York and who she's seen as with in New York. And if she is seen with the Russians and the Chinese, it may suggest some sort of a growing alliance with those 3 countries in this part of the world. So definitely something to watch.
All righty, Professor Shadow, thanks so much for joining us this morning. You have a good one.
Thank you for having me, Donnie. Take care.
Over in Japan, high-level officials from South Korea, China, and Japan in charge of culture met on Thursday to expand cultural cooperation, following tourism talks the previous day. Ahead of the trilateral meeting, also addressed was the recent controversy over Japan's Sado mine. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin has this report.
2024 marks the 25th anniversary of trilateral cooperation between South Korea, China, and Japan, which began in 1999 with a breakfast meeting on the sidelines of the ASEAN Plus 3 summit. This year, the three countries are focused on deepening their cooperation through culture. On Thursday, representatives from the three nations gathered in Kyoto for the 15th South Korea-China-Japan Culture Ministers meeting. South Korea was represented by First Vice Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, Yong Ho-sung, after Minister Yoo In-chun had to return to Seoul for a parliamentary questioning as the National Assembly had not approved his absence. China's Vice Minister of Culture and Tourism, Zhang Zheng, and Japan's Minister of Education, Culture, Sport, Science and Technology, Moriyama Masahito, were also in attendance. The meeting resulted in two key documents. The Kyoto Declaration emphasizes the importance of cultural exchanges and cooperation to promote mutual understanding and to further strengthen trilateral relations. The three sides also signed a memorandum of cooperation to designate 2025 and 2026 as years of cultural exchanges.
We agreed on the importance of expanding cooperation beyond arts and culture to include sports and programs involving the future generations.
In the bilateral meetings that South Korea held with Japan and China ahead of the three-way talks, eyes were on the follow-up measures for Japan's Sado Island gold mines being listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The site has been a point of contention as Koreans were forced to work there during World War II under Japanese colonial rule.
We asked Japan to improve its exhibits at the Aikawa History Museum on the hardships faced by Korean laborers, as the current displays are mostly simple panels. We suggested making them more permanent and detailed. We also requested that senior Japanese officials attend the memorial ceremony for the mine laborers.
Simplifying visa issuance and entry processes with China was another key topic. Both sides agreed to initiate working-level talks involving the foreign and justice ministries to streamline these procedures.
Until now, we didn't have a regular framework for tourism cooperation with China, so we agreed to set up a regular high-level consultative body.
The meeting ended with a joint performance between opera singers of the three countries and Japan's multicultural orchestra ensemble Kanazawa Chamber Orchestra. Promising more cultural exchanges in the next 2 years and beyond, the three countries wrapped up their culture ministers meeting on Thursday. The trilateral meeting's 16th edition will take place in China next year. Song Yujin, Arirang News, Kyoto.
Good morning, I'm Kim Jong-un, and this is The World Now. The Polaris Dawn space mission crew aboard a SpaceX capsule have become the first non-professional crew to complete a spacewalk. Billionaire tech entrepreneur Jared Isaacman, who commercially funded the mission, and Sarah Gillies, a SpaceX engineer, stepped out of the spacecraft around 15 minutes apart, beginning at around 10:52 on Thursday, Greenwich Mean Time. Isaacman said emerging from the spacecraft that back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world. SpaceX engineer Gillies emerged from the capsule after Isaacman returned a few minutes later. This walk, conducted at an altitude of 700 kilometers, was higher than any previous spacewalk and used new extravehicular activity astronaut suits. Also aboard the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule were Scott Petit, a retired U.S. Air Force veteran, and SpaceX engineer Anna Menon. The mission, launched on Tuesday on the Resilient spacecraft, aims to travel up to 1,400 kilometers up in orbit, going further than any human has done since NASA's Apollo program, which ended in the 1970s. Now, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Thursday condemned Wednesday's attack by the Israeli military on a school in Gaza run by the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, the UNRWA. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said that Wednesday's airstrikes on the school compound in central Gaza killed at least 18, including 6 UNRWA staff, women and children, bringing up the total number of UNRWA staff deaths in the conflict to 220. Dujarric said that, quote, "The continued lack of effective protection for civilians in Gaza is unconscionable, and that this incident must be independently and thoroughly investigated to ensure accountability." Now, the U.S. White House also said on Thursday that it is in touch with its Israeli counterparts for more information on the airstrikes. The Israeli military on Thursday stated that 9 men it said were Hamas militants were killed in the UNRWA school airstrikes. UNRWA reported that the attack saw the highest death toll of its staff in a single incident, while Guterres called upon all parties to refrain from using schools and shelters for military purposes. Storm Francine, which struck Louisiana as a Category 2 hurricane on Wednesday, has now passed over New Orleans, pouring 13 to 18 centimeters of rain on the city. According to the National Hurricane Center, Francine made landfall at the Terrebonne Parish, South Louisiana State, at 5 p.m. local time, but calmed into a post-tropical cyclone with sustained wind speeds of around 40 kilometers per hour. No deaths were reported. However, both Louisiana and Mississippi declared states of emergency, while the National Weather Service issued a flash flood emergency warning for some 12 million people. According to PowerOutage.us, some 320,000 customers were temporarily without electricity in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Now, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry on Wednesday told residents to stay off the roads, stay home, and stay put. Stars shined once again at this year's MTV Video Music Awards, celebrating its 40th edition. American singer Taylor Swift took home the top honor at this year's annual Video Music Awards with the black and white music video Fortnite featuring rapper Post Malone. The video for Swift's first single from the album The Tortured Poets Department was released in April and is set inside a bleak hospital, which Swift said reflects what she sees in her head. Now, Taylor Swift took home a total of 7 awards on Wednesday night, including Video of the Year. Other winners included Sabrina Carpenter for Best Song, Eminem's Houdini for Best Hip Hop, and Chappelle Rowan's for Best New Artist.
Good morning. It's a wet and cloudy start to the eve of the Chuseok holiday weekend for the capital and Gangwon-do province, with rain clouds passing by. And it's going to rain on and off all day in central parts of Korea. The capital and northern parts of Gangwon-do could see 20 to 60 millimeters of showers under gray skies. Southern provinces, however, will be under sunnier skies, seeing sporadic rain at times. So the heat stays in southern regions, with heat alerts being in place. Temperatures could hover around 33 degrees Celsius this afternoon. But rain gives heat relief to the upper regions, staying below 30 degrees. Seoul gets up to 27, but Daegu and Gyeongju topping out at 34 degrees this afternoon. Now, due to the indirect effect of Typhoon Babinka that's heading towards the south coast of Shanghai from Okinawa, more heat will be pushed towards the Korean peninsula. So expect to have summer-like heat with showers during the Chuseok holiday. And on the day of Chuseok, we will be able to see the full moon, but not as clearly as we'd like. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for our morning edition of Arirang News. A new day at Arirang will be back next Thursday after the Chuseok holiday.